During the second impeachment trial of Donald Trump, we were fed a particular narrative around the events of January 6th. In particular, the event where a group of rioters and protesters stormed the Capitol grounds and eventually gained access to the Capitol building, violently clashing with Capitol Police in an event which led to a multitude of injuries, arrests, and even a few tragic deaths. That said, the narrative around that was that not only did Donald Trump summon, foment, and incite the mob to storm the Capitol, charges for which he was acquitted by the United States Senate following his impeachment trial, but he was also accused, but not charged, accused of failing to deploy the National Guard to bolster the Capitol Police who were being overrun by the crowd. Now, these accusations don't really mesh with reporting from the time. Reporting from the time suggested that a lot of people had an idea that January 6th would turn violent. In fact, there were reports from not only law enforcement and intelligence agencies suggesting it, but also plenty of media reports suggesting that violence would be a possibility on that day. Yet, despite this, Capitol Police seemed to not be adequately staffed, even though everybody was tense about the event itself. There were also reports that Donald Trump had, prior to the January 6th events, prior to the date of January 6th, pre-authorized and delegated authority for the deployment of the National Guard on January 6th should it become necessary. Despite all this, Donald Trump was accused of not acting to deploy the National Guard. Well, today, the Senate has a hearing on this event questioning Capitol security officials, and some of their testimony is pretty interesting, and that's what we're going to cover here today. Now, why am I talking about this? Hey, I'm Nick Rekieta of Rekieta Law, a small law firm in central Minnesota. I'm a lawyer and a legal and political commentator here on YouTube. If you like legal and political opinions, news, analysis, commentary, jokes, hit the subscribe button and that notification bell so you don't miss any videos. Okay, now, hear me out. I know the source here is NBC News, and NBC News is trash. However, we're not reading it for the news reporting here. We're reading it for the quotes, and I think some of these quotes are very, very telling, and that's why I've got the article pulled up. It'll be in the description below if you care to click on it. If you don't, I don't care. We're going to hit the main stuff that I found important in the article. I don't know if you'd find anything else important, but that's up to you. Up to you. We're gonna talk about what I want to talk about. This is my place. Capitol security officials blame poor intelligence and each other for the January 6th riot. Interestingly, the headline does not have Capitol security officials blaming Donald Trump for the riot or the response. Kind of important. Intelligence reports said the level of probability of acts of civil disobedience and arrest ranged from remote to improbable, the former Capitol Police chief testified. So we're going to jump down here to just below that picture, and we're going to read this first part. It says, officials in charge of security for the Capitol on January 6th on Tuesday blamed poor intelligence in a sluggish response from the federal government for the deadly riot that threatened the peaceful transfer of power. A brief note about that. I am having a hard time believing that there was a threat to the peaceful transition of power, which would occur 14 days later, despite the violent events at the Capitol, which were anything but peaceful. There was no threat to the transfer of power. This happened in advance of the transfer of power, and there was no, that I can tell, there's no credible thought that this group of people were even planning to, much less capable of effectively overthrowing government rule and instituting Trump as some sort of dictator. That would have taken significantly more action and probably military intervention on behalf of Trump. Something people had talked about leading up to the events of January 6th, that Trump might deploy the military and institute a military coup, something I suggested was probably not going to happen and would have been absolutely terrifying, but that was kind of the chatter there. This was not that, and this didn't ever seem to have any ability to affect a long-term solution at all. And by long-term, I mean more than a couple hours. There wasn't any possibility that once the proper amount of authority and force arrived, that these people were going to be able to remain in the Capitol. And it honestly didn't seem like they had much intention of doing so, despite media reports that there were people hunting down and trying to murder congresspeople. Maybe there were, I don't know. I'm having a hard time believing that, but that's where it is. That being said, let's move on. Despite significant online chatter and numerous media reports that protesters were targeting the electoral vote count during the joint session of Congress, former Capitol Police Chief Stephen Sund said intelligence reports compiled from information from the Capitol Police, FBI, Secret Service, Department of Homeland Security, and D.C. Metro Police showed, quote, the level of probability of acts of civil disobedience and arrests on January 6 ranged from remote to improbable. In addition, the Daily Intelligence Report indicated that Secretary of Homeland Security has not issued an elevated or imminent alert at this time. So he's saying that they didn't have intelligence indicating this. And the question I have here is why? Why? Almost everybody else knew about it. They're talking above numerous media reports, significant online chatter, and we've seen intelligence reports from even the New York Police Department, the FBI, that suggested that there would be violence on this day and that they should be adequately prepared for it. So the question is, what's going on there? He says, without the intelligence to properly prepare, the USCP was significantly outnumbered and left to defend the Capitol against an extremely violent mob. So moving down, asked about a January 5th threat report from the FBI's field office outside Norfolk, Virginia, that detailed specific calls for violence at the Capitol online, including that protesters be ready to fight and show up ready for war, Sund testified it had gone to an intelligence official in the Capitol Police and that he had not seen it. And there's another question as to why. Why didn't you see this? If this report from the FBI detailing specific threats and violence existed, why wasn't this implemented and acted upon? I'm going to skip the testimony of Robert Conti here because I don't think it's super interesting. He's just talking about how he was able to deploy the Metro Police and he was shocked that the National Guard didn't do the same. Oh, well, let's read this. Let's read this. Quote, I was stunned at the response from the Department of the Army, which was reluctant to send the D.C. National Guard to the Capitol. While I certainly understand the importance of both planning and public perception, the factors cited by the staff on the call, these issues become secondary when you're watching your employees vastly outnumbered by a mob being physically assaulted. So he's saying that the Department of the Army was concerned about planning and public perception issues, and that he didn't think that that was appropriate while he was watching his employees be attacked. So the question here is, of course, remembering the narrative from the impeachment trial, they blamed Trump, but this is coming from the Department of the Army's refusal to deploy the D.C. National Guard prior to the event. In his opening statement, Sund also blamed the now former House Sergeant-at-Arms Paul Irving and former Senate Sergeant-at-Arms Michael Stenger for the sluggish response. These are the House and the Senate field commanders, so to speak, the Sergeant-at-Arms for both of them. Sund said he had tried to enlist the National Guard for help in the days before the riot, but, quote, Irving stated that he was concerned about the optics of having National Guard present and didn't feel that the intelligence supported it. That is from the House Sergeant-at-Arms Paul Irving. Not the White House, not the Secret Service, not Donald Trump, not one of the White House officials, but from the House Sergeant-at-Arms Paul Irving. Sund also asked Stenger for help ahead of time. Quote, instead of approving the use of the National Guard, however, Mr. Stenger suggested I ask them how quickly we could get support if needed and to lean forward in case we had to request assistance on January 6th. So he goes to the people actually in charge of defense at the Capitol for the House and the Senate, and they say, don't do it. Sund said the pair were also slow to respond during the riot. Quote, I notified the two Sergeant-at-Arms by 1:09 p.m. that I urgently needed support and asked them to declare a state of emergency and authorize the National Guard, Sund said. I was advised by Mr. Irving that he needed to run it up the chain of command. I continued to follow up with Mr. Irving, who was with Mr. Stenger at the time, and he advised that he was waiting to hear back from congressional leadership, but expected authorization any moment. Congressional leadership would have been Nancy Pelosi. Now, who would... No, let's not go there. Let's not get into motives. So this guy is suggesting that he requested from the House Sergeant-at-Arms assistance of the National Guard both before and during the riots, and he refused at first and was slow to respond later, suggesting that Nancy Pelosi hadn't gotten back to him. That's the testimony of Sund. Now, Irving, in the interest of completeness, Irving pushed back against Sund's account, saying he did not recall speaking to him at the time and had no record of any phone calls or text messages from Sund. He also denied that he'd voiced any concerns about optics. That is categorically false. Irving said, optics as portrayed in the media did not determine our security posture. Safety was always paramount when evaluating security for January 6th. We did discuss whether the intelligence warranted having troops at the Capitol, and our collective judgment at that time was no, the intelligence did not warrant that. So, Irving is denying his and Nancy Pelosi's responsibility in any way for what happened. Huge shocker. It's also a huge shocker that Sund is denying his responsibility, saying that he tried to act and other people got in his way. What's notably absent from this is the notion that Donald Trump in any way was asked or refused to act. And this is coming from the Capitol security officials themselves. And it sounds like they had authorization outside of using Donald Trump to go ahead and get this taken care of. And if Nancy Pelosi has the authority to instruct the Sergeant at Arms of the House, or if Mitch McConnell or Dick Durbin had any authority, not Dick Durbin, the other guy, doesn't matter. If they had any authority to instruct their Sergeant of Arms in the Senate to go ahead and issue a call to the National Guard and to get them deployed, and they didn't do it, we have to ask what was going on there. Why are they blaming Donald Trump for failures that were much more local to the problem? People who were on the ground who definitely knew what was going on. They said a lot in the impeachment trial that Trump absolutely knew what was going on because he must have. But these people were actually there and in communication with several individuals during these events. So why wasn't the National Guard called in by them? These are questions that remain to be answered. There are more hearings coming on the subject. I may be covering some of them. One of them is coming up on Thursday, and that is the House, and they will be asking specific questions to various Capitol Police officials, and it might be interesting to see what some Republicans ask about what Nancy Pelosi knew and when. Anyways, thanks for watching. Drop a comment below. Tell me what you think about the Capitol 6 riot, who bears the blame, what happened that day, and what are we going to see coming on Thursday. Until then, have a good day. Peace. Peace.